they need to realize, too, a lot of times comedians are facetious. They say something they don't mean what they're saying half the time. In fact, they're probably the opposite of what you think they believe. It's just like, people need to take it with a grain of salt. And that's what comedy and even the Seuss thing, it's like, well, if they want to ban it, they want to ban it. I don't really think that, I think there are far more problems. And I think they want to really, in society, of course I hate all kinds of reasons. I would just say change the laws. That's the biggest thing we need to do.
Right. A good... you brought up something that I was going to say, and then I got sidetracked by my own tangent, but it's this. And Lenny Bruce, speaking of George Carlin and Lenny Bruce, he came out, I think, on the Steve Allen show, and they said... on Steve Allen, he was like one of the original... I think Steve Allen might have been like one of the original late-night TV talk show hosts. Steve Allen was. But Steve Allen was known for putting any act on his show at the time. Like I think he was the first guy to put Jerry Lee Lewis on the show. And that was very controversial. And he had Lenny Bruce on. He says, now, we're going to bring a comedian on that's sure to offend everybody. And he kind of made that joke as he set it up. And they told him, because Lenny Bruce had been kind of the Carlin-esque of his time, ahead of time, with the cussing and the, as they say, obscene language for that time. And he came out on stage. He said, they told me you got to be careful. We don't want to offend anybody. He says, yeah, I am offended by a lot of things. He says, one of the things that offends me, he said certain words offend certain people. He said, I'll tell you, one of the words that offends me is segregation. And then he just left it at that. He didn't really go on to it, but he pointed out that as a person, one of the things that he was offended at was the word segregation. And the idea, I feel, given the body of his work that he had committed himself to performing, was that he was trying to find a way to move beyond separating people from race to race and including and making people more equal. But
the jokes and stuff are one thing, and maybe for some people to argue, well, maybe it's good, it's a start, it's good that people have a concern too, and I would say that. My whole thing is, honestly, I think we just need to change, and I think most police are good and stuff, but my thing is, we just need to change, we need to have more understanding and more safety nets for people so they're not being, attacked because of their race or whatever.
Yeah, or maybe it's not even their race. Maybe it's just that, maybe it's not their race. Maybe it's not their race. I'm not saying it isn't or isn't. I'm saying sometimes it's just that, hey, these cops need to be plumbers and these plumbers need to be painters, because I've had a lot of bad experiences with plumbers. And I actually have a joke. I have a joke that I wrote, and I started performing it, and it's coming out pretty good. And it goes like this, something like this. Have you ever noticed that, well, for instance, maybe we should stop calling police brutality. We should start calling it, instead of police brutality, we should start calling it vocational-based brutality, because it's really based on the job they're doing. It's not based on, because you have that same problem with plumbers. The similarities between police brutality and plumber brutality is, when you have police brutality, you end up with a broken head and a bill that you have to pay. And the difference, right, because the idea is the toilet's called the head, and then a bunch of, crap you have to clean up. And I think I said, because there's a lot of plumbers out there that are creating plumber abuse. It's plumber violence, where they're coming into my house and they're creating a worse problem, and I end up with a broken head, bill to pay, and no justice. And a lot of these police, same way. So I always say in my jokes, yes, not all Christians, and not all cops, and not all plumbers, also not all NFL superstars, also not all marketers, also blah, blah. And I just go on and I start naming all these people. And then I say, only the ones in this joke.